going to be on the TV?
You are.
All right, hold on. It's not the TV.
We
is
can't
on.
cut this. I didn't because I thought it would be distracting.
Oh, this guy also not on. Okay,
The TV is not on, but you were.
I'm on. All right. I'm Don Houghton, and I'm the president of the Craftsbury Historical Society, and we are here this afternoon at the Craftsbury Town Hall on April 21st, 2023, and I'm here with five very prominent women from Craftsbury, and we're here to initiate the program that we're calling Craftstories, which is it's certainly stories, but it's got to do with Craftsbury, and it's got to do with stories, and it's got to do with histories. And the reason that we're doing it is that we want this to be, we don't have any time limit on completing this project. This is an open-ended project. And the idea is to convince people in Craftsbury that their stories matter. That Craftsbury's history is not just about the Simpsons, it's not just about the crafts, but it's about the people who live and work in Craftsbury right now. That if you've come to Craftsbury to live and work as of yesterday, your story matters, and we would like to know your story. So I have some questions that I've come up with, and I think we're going to start with Michelle.
Okay.
Let me ask the question first.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Okay.
First of all, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to ask. You can say where you can tell me where you're from. I'd like to know your name. I'd like to know when and why you came to Craftsbury. We'd like to know what you do in Craftsbury. We're wondering if there's anything about Craftsbury itself that kind of sets it apart from anywhere else that you might live in Craftsbury. And then finally, is there a family story that you would like to tell us so that we can remember a story about your family living in Craftsbury? So, Michelle, thank you for coming.
My name is Michelle Warren, and I grew up in Perkinsville, which is southern Vermont. My dad's last name was Holden, and my mother's maiden name was Courier. I graduated from Springfield, Vermont High School in 1984 with almost 200 students in my class. I met Patrick Warren at Vermont Technical College, and we got married in 1986, moved to Craftsbury in 1989. We both worked in Stowe for about 30 years. Patrick is a carpenter. I was a manager at the Stowe Motel for over 30 years. We raised our son Wesley, who we lost to suicide in 2017 at the age of 25. Patrick's grandfather was Paul Brown, who owned a house where Allen Auto is now. He graduated from Craftsbury Academy in 1935 and was a lefty pitcher for the Craftsbury Commoners. Patrick's father, Pat Warren, died from a logging accident before he was born. His mother, Burl, remarried several years later to Allen, also known as Bunny Sweat. Bunny was the Craftsbury Common postmaster for over 30 years. He passed away in 2000 from a heart attack. Bunny had been on the recreation committee running Old Home Day for over 30 years. So after Bunny passed away, I served on the town's recreation committee for about 10 years. I was also on the school's PTA for about 5 years and helped create an elementary yearbook. I also served on the board of the 4 Cs, helping with their newsletters and website. And after my son's death, our town started a mental health committee, the first of its kind in all of Vermont. I'm currently the town clerk and treasurer, and I was elected in 2022. For over 10 years, I was also the select board clerk. And then about 20 years ago, I started the town's website and Facebook page, and I'm still one of the people who helps to maintain Craftsbury's online presence with Dawn. There is something amazing about Craftsbury. The people here are genuine, they're down to earth, they're helpful. The select board, the fire department, the committee, stores actually respect and get along with each other. I know after my son passed away, our town was incredibly supportive. I honestly can't imagine living anywhere else.
Did you say where you live in Craftsbury?
I did not. That would be kind of helpful now, wouldn't it? I live in Mill Village, a couple buildings past where Little Osmer is.
Next to where Bunny lives, right? You're the next
It
house
was
up.
actually Bunny's land, believe it or not. It was one of his fields, so yes, two properties past where Bunny's sweat lives.
All right. You know, we can, if this, we could kind of, if anybody had a question, we could ask, we could open it up to a question for Michelle. Any questions?
I just have a comment that I've had the honor to work with Michelle on and off through different committees. She's also really involved with the church and organizing things for the church and being on recreation committee with her. And just, I mean, I just think the world of her. And I think we're really lucky to have her as a town clerk. When I was a lister, I got to see her working, doing that job. And I know it's not an easy job at all. And she's just always been competent and always giving her time and never complaining. Like the other day, I needed to get into the church and I couldn't get the code in to get in. And she was like, "Oh, I'll be right up there. It's pouring rain and cold out." And luckily I figured out, and I could call her back and say I figured it out. But just to say, we're really, really lucky to have Michelle here.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's making an impact.
Yeah.
The other day, I was going through shelves and old pamphlets and books over there, and I found a list of the town clerks of Craftsbury. There's about a dozen of them, so I took it over to Michelle and I had her put her name in to describe her name and, you know, and then an historical position of being a town clerk in the town of Craftsbury.
You know, surprisingly, you'd think there'd be a lot more town clerks, but it wasn't even
It was
10,
about-
I
it
think,
was
10,
about
12,
a dozen,
15.
yeah.
I mean, I would have thought in all the years that, and some of them were only a couple of years, so some of them really stayed a long time. I mean, you know, Effie was here 34 years, and there were some others that were like 30, I think it was 34 years, yeah. And there were some other ones that were, one was 50, I think. I mean, my goodness.
Well, there was at least one or two who were women who took over after their husbands died. I think,
Okay,
and they didn't stay long. I think they just stayed, you know, the placeholder.
I think that's a phenomenon that I had to get used to, was that, office holders by name, I mean, I don't know, I didn't certainly know them all when we got here, but it seemed to me that there were certain people whose names were always there.
Right.
It didn't change. Every town meeting, same thing, not a lot of change. And I had questions about how come, but I understand it now, and I'm very grateful. Really grateful. There is an amazing kind of talent and gift and dedication I've never known in other places I've lived. So, although my roots aren't here, you know, I've grown roots, and they tell me, you matter.
exactly.
You matter, you.
Well, you know, it really is, you know, there's something about when there's other towns I've gone to that town clerk's offices or, you know, select board and stuff. And, you know, we have an amazing select board. They listen to you. They're really down to earth. They're not stuffy. They're good people. You know, they get along with each other. And even if they don't always agree with everything, they respect each other enough to listen to each other. And from what I've seen in the paper before, that's not the case in all towns. So we're really blessed to have the organizations that we, you know, that the roads committee get along with each other. You know, we're really lucky
Well,
that.
the road through the fire department, they're very coherent.
Yeah,
The school we've had.
exactly. We're very blessed because a lot of towns don't have that. They really don't. So I feel very lucky to live here. I really do. So.
Thank you, Michelle. Allison,
Yeah.
There you are.
do you want me to go over the questions again?
You can ask them as we go along.
Okay.
You can help me along if
Yeah.
I don't get them. So I'm Allison Van Akron, and I moved Craftsbury in 1983. And I came from Wisconsin, so I live in Craftsbury. At this point, I didn't always live here, I moved to where I live now in 1997 or so. But I live on the Post Road, so down the Post Road in a lovely little spot. We spent years looking for land and, you know, wrote to absentee landowners, told them what our dreams were, felt like we would never find it. We didn't have a lot of money and, we got very lucky. We bought, the land that we bought we had actually just, you know, not long before that had paddled down the Black River, we're right on the Black River. And we saw this beautiful field up in the way and said, boy, wouldn't that be a beautiful place to live? And we said, oh, we thought Sunny Sweat wanted it at that point, and we said, but we know that Sunny's not gonna sell any of his land. And actually with Robert Anderson, and we got really lucky that John Broadhead had known that we were looking for land, and Robert had put this little sign up saying it's for sale, and he told us right away that we were able to. I mean, it's a much longer story, but it's a little bit controversial, so I won't get into all that, but we did eventually get that land, and we're very happy there. So, so we live on the Post Road, but I came to Craftsbury in 1983. I came to Craftsbury from Wisconsin. I'm originally from Wisconsin. I have really deep Wisconsin roots. And the hometown I'm from, I have 9 brothers and sisters, and a lot of my brothers and sisters are there. And the hometown that I'm from, I've had some people sometimes mention that my family's like royalty there, because we've been there for a long time, similar to what happens around here. And so to go away and move to the East Coast, which in my head was always like crowded, and why would I ever want to move east? You know, I always imagine if I go anywhere, I go west, because I love sunshine and big open spaces and wild lands. But I had gone right from undergrad into grad school into working a professional job at a hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. And my brother talked me into doing, and I always loved activity, like I did lots of bike trips and things like that. But my brother talked me into doing the Birkebeiner cross-country ski race, which is the biggest cross-country ski race, which takes place in Wisconsin, but the biggest one that happens in the United States. And I went and did it. Make a long story short, I met John Broadhead and Keith Woodward and Mary Ostergen, who were all from the Craftsbury Outdoor Center. They were staying at the same youth hospital I was at. And you know how it is, you see people are eating sort of the same kind of food, and you come together and you start talking. Well, they told me that I could come to Craftsbury. They asked me how can I ski. And, you know, I said, you know, I swim and run, keep in shape for skiing, but I ski maybe twice a week. You know, it wasn't that I got out all that often. And they told me I could cross-country ski every day and be a nutritionist at their outdoor center. And so I waited a year, like I stayed at my job, and I came the next winter, drove up in my 72 Duster, straight cross country. I'd never been on the East Coast before. Came on December 12th, 1985. Yeah, I said 1983, but 1985. And landed in Craftsbury. And Craftsbury was much more isolated feeling back then. So yeah, and my first year in Craftsbury, and I found this is pretty true for me in all my years, and it wasn't until I had a child that I really felt like I got involved in the community in Craftsbury, that I was very dedicated to the places I worked. So my life was pretty much at Craftsbury Outdoor Center. And so I did that for several years and ran all different, like I ran the mountain biking and the walking program and the elder hustle program. And I ran the kitchen, and Michelle knows.
I remember that.
She worked with me too when I was the resident supervisor, and so I started getting my whole life to there, and actually and skied a lot, which made me really happy. And so since I was 15, I worked conservation camp, and I knew that I wanted some land to caretake, and so I started looking for some land, and I'm trying to make it short, but how did I get around to where I'm at now? Well, anyway, a friend had suggested that I maybe really, and I was looking for some like remote kind of land, like living wildernessy, and a friend had suggested that maybe I should first see if that's how I'm gonna live. So I actually built a house on somebody else's land, about a mile by foot in the woods, and that was over in South Albany, or in the East Albany, I guess, East Albany, and then and I lived there for a while. And then I wasn't sure this is really where I wanted to stay. I wasn't feeling that connected, and I was starting to get a little disconcerted with what was going on at the outdoor center, so I was trying to figure out where I should go next, so I went and lived up in Colorado for a winter. And realized that I had really gotten pretty deeply into the culture around here, like loving the contra dance and played with the contra dance band, and just realized also that I love water, and it has to rain in order for you to love water, so I wanted to start loving the fact that it would rain and maybe be a little darker, not always so sunny. So I moved back to Craftsbury and eventually started working at Sterling College. I started there running a summer youth employment program, and they asked me to stay on, like the work I was doing. And that was in 1991. So once again, I gave my whole entire life to Sterling College. All my focus was there, didn't really get deeply into the community, except for I was still connected with outdoor center, so I was sort of building there. And then we built our house, and then had our son Kestrel I'm married to Adrian Owens, and we had our son Kestrel in 1998. We had moved in our house and then had him, and that's where really things expanded. Barb Strong and I met each other while we were pregnant, and Barb was like only 2 weeks away from it. And the first day we met each other, we walked 10 miles. We just were talking so much and we were walking, and we became really close friends. And she really knew how to be involved in community and get connected with community, and that's really how I learned those kind of skills. And she and I started a play group, and that was really tremendous, because we have still those friends that we built with that play group that still are really close friends, and we all get to watch where our kids are and what we're doing. And that's even extended people from beyond Craftbury. So it was really, we started doing that every single week actually. And Barb took care of my son while I was working also, which were really wonderful. So that's sort of how I got involved in the community and sort of stayed involved with the schools, doing the Four Winds program, which we used to call the ELF program, which is too bad it's not called that, because I used to love to say it was like ELF training, but now it's Four Winds training, and still doing that for 20 some years, and involved in a lot of like the recreation committee, all kinds of things in town, really involved with the schools. Farm to school was a really big part of my what I believed in. That's sort of where I took my background is in nutrition, and that's where I sort of took my belief of what to do with my nutrition, was to be teaching people about growing your own foods and eating good foods. And yeah, I worked at Sterling for 30 some years. A couple of years ago, I retired, and I still teach there. I still do some teaching. I'm still involved. My husband still works there. Did I say Adrian Owens? And love still to ski and bike and be involved. And I'm really busy with gardens. I have lots of gardens, and we grow almost all our own food, and we live off the grid. And yeah, we try to sort of, I guess you could say, homestead. We try to live as simply as we can, trying to bike places. And
you bike here today.
I bike here today. Yeah. I was working in the garden before here. So,
You also do the community dinner.
oh yeah, and
Don't forget that.
right,
So,
so, yeah, I've been, it's only been really for 2 years. Craftsbury did it for 10 years after that, but we got started. That was actually a really cool COVID story. In that my nutrition, I have always done the community dinner as part of my nutrition class. I used to, and I also taught a community food action class, and really like to get the Sterling students involved in the community. Like I would get them teaching in the elementary school in my environmental education class. And so to me, that was like really fun to take the things that I did as a volunteer in the community and get the Sterling students involved in those things. And so in March 2020, we were supposed to, this is a fun story. We were supposed to do the community dinner as part of my community food action class. And of course, COVID came down, everything shut down, but I had all this food and everything was ready to go. And there were some students who were still hanging on because they didn't know where to go. It was like just too much, like they had to stay on because they didn't really have a place to go. And there's some in my class. And so we, after a lot of discussion with different people in the community and the church and all that, we decided that we were going to do the food, make the food, and then but do it as a takeout. And so, we started that, and then Barb really liked it, so then she did the next week, and then we just started doing every other week, and then people have donated, food and all kind of, the general store and Stone College donated food, and East Greens donated food, so we started doing it every single week, we were making food for the community, and there's a whole crew of people who backed it up. Then the program, trying to think, what's it called, the one where they paid people who had a food business to make the food, the Everybody Eats program came on, and sort of took over what we were doing there, but then when that dropped out, I would do it. Like, there was a period where it didn't happen, so I did it for a while again, and then we started just doing a once a month community dinner. And it's been taken up, but we're hoping to start in person again. I'm still being a little bit cautious, so we'll see how that works. Yeah, and I volunteer a lot at the outdoor center too. And,
I mean, it's a wonderful thing for the church, you know, the church only has. She picked it up, but, you know, it's something that's been really important for the church to be able to do, but I know way back Barb had started it, and I know it's important to Alan Parker in the day, and to have that continue, especially during COVID, and have it so important in the community was, we're just very blessed to have you do that at the church, so thank you very much for doing that. It's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work, but it's also, there's so much joy, especially like seeing like the people who are, you know, it's really open to everyone, and some of it is like, you know, young families, and the parents are like, oh, this is such a nice break for me, or, you know, just, it's really fun to know, and I love to cook. I mean, I didn't mention that I have run the kitchen at Sterling, and I sort of changed over Sterling's, Sterling had a food service company, running it, and it was not very good food or in line with the mission at Sterling, so, I ran that kitchen for a long time, besides teaching, and so, really good whole foods is a big part of who I am, and it's really fun for me to like make these community dinners, and get all this wonderful stuff from Pete's Greens, and be able to like fill it with good organic vegetables for people too. So it's,
You should make a really good bread at the outdoor center.
yeah, yeah, I used to do a lot of good things.
How are our stones?
I have not had them. Doesn't mean I won't though, but yes.
So did I answer all the
I
questions?
think you did. Any comments or questions?
Is that all? I mean, when you say family stories, I mean, I don't, I guess when I, you know, think overall, I only had one child, and, I didn't really ever really imagine, it wasn't like a big part of my life that I was gonna have children. I always wanted to be adventuring and doing other things, but, it's been the greatest thing in my life to have that child, and to have him be so wonderful. And I think it was really a huge honor when he got named, whatever the school calls, like, not the valedictorian, but it's the one that the teachers decide is like the student, it's not, it's not the student of the year, but it's like they get their name on a trophy. That's wonderful. Yeah, and that was just, I mean, we used to always say, because we always used to say he was like our little ambassador, because he was always willing to go out and talk to people and things like that. But that, you know, to be part of a community, and there's a lot of names on that of people who are really deeply embedded in the community, to be someone who's more or less an outsider in the community and have this receive that honor is really great.
You know, and there's something about Barb Strong. She has this gift with people that just, you know, she makes everyone feel welcome, and she is so helpful with things. And, you know, she was one of those people that, you know, let you into the community, because I was kind of like, I was always at work, and so my connection to Craftsbury really didn't happen until Leslie was born, and then I started doing activities for the school, and, you know, and then it just blossomed from there. But before that, I was just going to work and back, and Craftsbury was just the place I lived. And, you know, over time it changed to a place it was my home, you know, so. Thank you for sharing that on with me.
Thanks, Al. Let's see, who's next? Peggy.
Oh, okay. Well,
Start with your name and where you live.
all right, thanks for the prompt. I'm Peggy Sapphire. We live on Maury Hill Road in a house that we built, mostly my husband and various people. who, you know, we found, Bobby is a builder and an artist with wood, and he also knew all about building house, so he was able to find the other craftspeople who we needed to do what Bobby couldn't do, he's not climbing the roofs and so on. Our dream, Bob and I, was to find a piece of land that we could afford, that in a place we wanted to be, which, and on which we could build a house. Bobby builds houses for everybody else in his life, meaning that was his work. And this was his chance finally to do it for us. But how did I find Craftsbury is interesting, because I was working as a special education counselor in a high school in northern Westchester, New York. And I took my students to the college fair, because I believe then and now and always that yes, they may have special needs, but they are full human beings with all sorts of potential, and I did not ever want to count them out. And so I wanted them to meet various representatives and get a feel for what that might be for them. And I met a lovely young woman who was sitting at a table for a college I never heard of, called Sterling. And I could swear her name was Margaret, but I may be wrong.
What year?
Huh?
What year is it?
It was in the early 90s. Anyway, I was intrigued by what I heard, and was, of course, wishing that I had discovered this place sooner. I wanted to see my daughters, take a look, and as it turned out, much later, I'll just say, we have a granddaughter who did come up and graduated from Sterling after many failures in other places. She found finally a place at Sterling. Anyway, so I told Bobby about it, and I came up, and we found a piece of land thanks to Jerry Peters. He and his wife, I know you know this, were the owners and so on at the Albany House, or the Albany Village House Inn, or something, you know, in the village. And he heard us talking about wanting to build and looking for land, and he said, and I learned later, you know, everybody here does 2 or 3 different things. He says, I'm also a realtor. He's serving us dinner, and I'm also a realtor, and I'd love to show you around. Where do you think you want to be? We really didn't know. We needed to learn. And he showed us different things, pieces of land, and then he said, oh yeah, there's a really nice piece up on Murray Hill Road. And Bobby instantly knew this was the place because of the way the landscape was perfect for being an ideal spot to build. And yet it also had woods all around and so on. So we moved up here. We both retired different times, but within a certain period of time, we gave ourselves, we had to sell the house we were in, which meant that Bobby had to do a bunch of work there. But he loved it, and he was so motivated. And, anyway, we got up here to live in 2000, having bought the land in 94. And we happened, it happened that this is the way it works, and I learned that it's hindsight. You speak to somebody, and then there's somebody else, and then there's a somebody else, and then there's some, you know, it just is a chain. It's a good chain. we were staying at the B&B that Margie used to run.
Yeah.
And she knew Karen and Arnold Smith, who don't come up in the winter, and you could stay there while your house is, you know.
Just right down the road from where
Yeah.
you go.
Right, just right down the road. So we went to see them, introduce ourselves, tell them what we needed. And, you know, 3 hours later, after a wonderful conversation, we came away with that arrangement. We became and remain good friends. Sorry, Sally Arnold isn't with us anymore, but Karen is a dear friend. And her sons were,
Then LaPointe
Mhm.
mom, right?
she was General Point's mom, and Brooks and Simon, her sons, and Brooks, I'll tell you that in a minute, he did something wonderful for me, which I'll explain, trying to synthesize. Anyway, we moved into the house, although it wasn't done in 2000. And that's okay that it wasn't done, it was everything we needed, you know. And that actually, Bobby had so many ideas and he was getting very stuck. Because, you know, when you draw out a house, every inch is another $10,000, you know, and it was like out of sight, out of our reach. And we took a ride one day to kind of just cool down, and we ran across a roundhouse on Route 58.
Yeah.
And Bobby said, "That's it,
That big round barn.
big round barn."
Yeah.
We made it an octagon, of course. Yeah. There's no, you know, when you have a house with no hidden corners, everything is usable and every inch matters. So Bobby fashioned that house. So the angles are very open, 22 degrees. So there's never no lost space. And we needed not a whole bunch of space, but we had books. Made a second floor smaller than the first. And there's an octagon also, and it has a library, you know. And two small guest rooms so kids and friends could come. Anyway, at about this time, when we finally moved in and so on, I really didn't know anybody, but I'm a writer. And I'll just say that living here gave me the time and the peace, not to mention the inspiration, to write. And I've had two poetry books published and a nonfiction book published, and I could never have done it anywhere else. I've had the pleasure of readings and reception, you know, the reception of people. That's a blessing, a gift, unexpected. I always have written, but I never thought it would be the thing that I worked on. In addition, by writing letters to the editor, which I've always done. In fact, I once got a gift, a going away gift of pad and paper. I mean, a pad and pen, so I could keep, you know, letters to the editor flowing. It was the Iraq War. And it turned out, and that's another story, that there was this other woman in town who was inspired by the same things I was, and that's Ann Hansen. So we became kindred spirits,
Right.
you know. How else, you know, give me a prompt.
Well,
I wish
you
I'd
are,
come
you
here
are.
when I was younger. I do, because I wish I could have been more involved in the town and the heart, you know, in terms of
Sometimes it's hard, we've discovered that it's hard if you live 6 miles out, that it's hard to be a part of. You know, often it's hard to be a part of the activities that are going on in town. It's an effort to get into town.
It's funny, that's how that works, yeah, it's true. Anyway, I've met some, you know. There's a core of people that I've come to know, and then living in this small place, on the one hand, being like a stranger. Because I didn't grow up here, my kids never went to school here, although, I would have loved it. How, you know, so there was a different kind of approach that I had to make to get involved. And I think it's because I wanted to be involved that it happened. And I've met and known some, you know, I mentioned to you Arnold Smith, who I loved and will always love, and Arnold Brown. Somebody said to me one day, "Do you know Arnold Brown?" And I said, "No, you should." And I did, because he was blind, he needed readers. And I committed myself to reading to him every week for hours and hours. He was insatiable. And, and he was a joy to be with, I don't have to tell you. Unfortunately, I never met Judith. She passed before we knew each other, but certainly Phil and Gretchen. Others, Alan Parker came by one day. And I knew, you know, I knew who he was, but I didn't know him personally. And he sat with Arnold and I, and he said to me, "I'm going to be ordained. Would you speak?" I mean, I was so moved. Of course, I did want to, and I did. How do you, you know, it's only an intimate community where that can happen. But it took me a while to feel that there could be that kind of intimacy. And I began to meet people who were from Sterling. And I thought to myself, I'm up here because my daughter and I wanted to explore Craftsbury. We heard about Sterling, well, she heard about it from me. And I thought, oh man, you know, in another life. This is an extraordinary place, because if you want to be involved, you can be, to the degree that you have a commitment or time or whatever. I mean, I found myself in a place in this place where it was just the right size. And I'm a city, you know, I'm a New York City preacher. I mean, I didn't live with
Is that where you came from?
well, like I say, in many places. I was
you-
born
where
in
you
Brooklyn,
from?
New York. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, but I have no memories of it because we didn't stay there. My folks moved around. My dad was a union organizer, and they moved around the country. Florida, Texas, Florida. Lived in Costa Rica, graduated high school there.
That's why you speak Spanish.
That's why I speak Spanish. Fluent. And when I'm with people who I can do that with, and I even came, when we returned, I was dreaming in Spanish.
No me digas.
See?
No me digas.
No. Pues es una lengua maravillosa.
Right.
Es verdad. It won't leave me. I will
No, you
always,
own it.
no,
You own
I do.
Right.
Came home, went to college, took that to masters, worked. I love teaching.
it. You love singing too.
I do. Folk singing.
No?
I learned we used to go to Pete Seeger concerts, you know, when I was in high school. My dear friend and I, who we known each other for 70 years. She and I would go to the Ethical Culture Society in New York. For 50 cents, right, 50 cents, and we do the hootenanny thing. And that's where I learned, and met Pete. Oh my God,
That'd be really
That's
cool.
amazing.
very amazing,
That is amazing.
very amazing. And
What a memory.
my dad actually had known him as a union guy. And Pete remembered. It was wonderful. Lots of history, but it's all, there's a circle. It's the most natural form in nature. And that's what happened here for me and Bobby.
So you're,
Oh, this
it's
is,
a circle.
this is a circle. This is called an Ouroboros. And Bobby made it. And he made a few others. He never wanted to make a lot of anything. One of a kind of guy. And so he's, well, the current situation is a tough one for me because he's got Alzheimer's and he's in the nursing home. But he's the same loving, peaceful sweetheart. I miss him. But it
Gentle
had to
person.
happen.
Gentle person.
What's that?
He was a very gentle person.
Yeah. Yeah. And he got, without Bobby, there's no way he could make a life here.
Mhm.
He had vision and talent and,
Yeah, there were two of them.
yeah. But, whenever somebody came along we needed, because Bobby couldn't do everything. So, but that became a conversation.
Mhm.
Lovely connection for the two of them because they appreciated each other's work and surely so do I. So. Craftsbury has if you want to be and can be involved, this is home. We'll never go anywhere else. That's the end. This is where. It's a great feeling.
It is a beautiful place. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, my golly. It's quite an experience, personally too.
Are you happy that you shared here today? Are you happy?
I'm very, yeah, I am. It's just a human story. I love the love story here of Anne, Adrienne, and having a family, and and Belle, Michelle. I don't know you as well, Carol, but this is extraordinary.
I think we're making the point very quickly that, family stories matter.
By all means. And there's nobody else to tell them except us. And they're not unimportant. People
No.
say, I've collected family stories because I told them, I'm really a believer in it. And people will say, but I just lived, it's my life, it's no big
Right.
deal. Yeah, it is. Your descendants will never know otherwise. You've got to tell your story. Whatever it is, will be loved. And gain in value as the years go by. And
Yeah,
things-
we have all these old photographs. We barely know who the people are, and you wonder, wow,
Yeah,
each one of them had some incredible life.
exactly, and they were part of your inheritance as these photographs are. So, it's your turn.
Oh, well, I think we should stop.
I believe.
I should have picked a different group to be in.
No.
This is quite a couple of people to follow. I'm Mabel Houghton, and I live on Uri Road, one of the lines of our property that we bought, I don't know how many years ago, but is, South Albany, so, and we live right before, the Urie's house, that's why this road is named after them, and, Still Meadow Gardens, which, right about now, the cars, we're gonna have traffic on that road, a lot of it, and then it'll diminish, but, everybody comes and buys their spring flowers and hanging plants and, those three big, greenhouses are full of stuff. It's really amazing. So, my husband Don and I came to Craftsbury a long time ago, in fact, 50 years ago,
Wow.
which I just realized. We had been married, so it was 1973, we had been married in 1972. And in Connecticut, where my aunt and uncle lived. My parents were in Spain at that point, so we tried to do a wedding that was family, but not go to Spain. And I was born in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and I didn't speak any English at all when we came to the States. I was 7 years old. My parents were part of this whole incredible process of people coming to find a good life, and contributing a tremendous amount, I think. And I went to high school in New Jersey, college in Massachusetts, and we came to Vermont because Don had gotten his master's program through Middlebury College and had spent a couple of summers at Middlebury. And then we were Peace Corps trainers. We weren't Peace Corps volunteers, we were training Peace Corps volunteers who were going to be working in French-speaking West Africa. So they needed to know French. So at that point, the training program was in the Virgin Islands of all places. So Don and I met in the Virgin Islands. And we worked hard all day, but then we'd go off sailing and scuba dive, not scuba diving. Huh? Snorkeling, right. Anyway, that's where the romance started. Anyway, after a couple of years of working in Massachusetts, Don decided he wanted to go north. He'd been in Vermont before, and in fact, he'd been in Vermont as a camp counselor for a while and was a little younger. So I went along with it. I didn't know much about Vermont, but we would spend weekends here, going from Massachusetts, and lo and behold, we were both French teachers at that point. Lo and behold, there were 3 French teaching jobs in this place called Craftsbury. So there was the academy, job at the academy, which Don got. There was Sterling, which was going from being Sterling School to Sterling College. And there was going to be a language department there. That turned out afterwards, they decided no. But there was still another French teaching job at Cutler Academy, which I got. And Cutler Academy doesn't exist anymore, but it is the outdoor center. But when I knew it, it was my classroom. So things went along, and we bought a house on the Common. It is now called Firefly House. It's used by Sterling. I don't know if it belongs to Sterling or not. But the whole
It still
time.
belongs to the guy who bought it.
Okay, The whole time, it was our house, but everybody called it the Gray House, because the Grays used to live there, so, while we were there, we, decided that we would, you know, we were kind of back to the Landers, sort of, but not completely back to the Landers, but, we decided we'd raise a couple of little piggies and some chickens, and we got together with another couple that had come shortly after us, Tim and Amelia Fritz. So we raised the piggies in our house and our backyard, and they raised the chickens at their place. That's where the funny story is. And you know, now I'm just kind of regretting, because it's not exactly, there's some parts of the story that aren't maybe as positive as they should be, but it was a pretty big deal. It was 1979, and the people that lived across from us, which is now Houston House, those people had started an inn, the Inn on the Common, and then they moved to the house to the south of that, and then used that house as the inn, and then they bought the house next to us, where we were kind of surrounded. And they didn't like the idea of us having pigs, even though that was a farm, originally was a farm, and Don built a beautiful pig area far away, you know, and the poor little piggies didn't get to drink any water. They had to learn how to drink out of a special contraption and suck at it so that they wouldn't be in a lot of mud. They probably hated being there, but they were cute little piggies. They were teeny weeny. And we got, all of a sudden, with the sheriff drove up our driveway, and it was an injunction. We couldn't have these pigs because the people next door, God forbid, you know, that any of the guests would see a pig.
Oh,
So that was the summer of our discontent, I guess.
What were the pigs' names?
Well, I'm getting to,
Oh,
well, I don't know, the pigs' names? Oh, well, that's coming, yeah. So we had to get a lawyer. We got like an expensive lawyer from Newport, and we had to pay for it, and we didn't pay anything. So we decided to sell T-shirts, and the T-shirts that we got said hogwash on the bottom. It was help our grunters win a secure home. It had three lovely pigs on it. Well, you know, we had a few T-shirts made up, and then at that point I was working at in the admissions office at Johnson State College, and people kept wanting more T-shirts, so we kept selling more T-shirts, and the only one left. We didn't even keep one afterwards, but somebody else just found this in their rag pile.
Where did you find that?
Huh?
I didn't know we had one.
Oh, my goodness.
This is help our grunters win a secure home.
Oh, my gosh.
Wow.
So, there were people in town, there were cigar boxes in both the stores with Houghton Defense Fund, and people gave money.
Oh, my goodness.
So anyway,
What year is it?
79.
That was 79.
That was around the time, a little before that Chris Braithwaite had started the Chronicle.
Okay.
And he heard about this, came and interviewed us, and wrote a big story. And then that story was on Walter Cronkite. It was in San Francisco Examiner. We have a pile, we have a thing which I should give to the of all the you know, because it was such a human interest story, you know. We ended up at that point, we had decided that we would keep our house, but that we were going to go teach somewhere else. So at the end of the summer, we left our little piggies in the care of Tim and Amelia Fritz, and somebody from, thinking about this, somebody from the sports center, the outdoor center, secretly would bring us food, leftover food from there for it to give to the pigs. It was, anyway, the whole thing finished with no, we ate the pigs. There was no trial, they withdrew their, without prejudice. But that's a
Wow.
long ago story. But let's see. So I taught at Cutler Academy for a couple of years. I worked at Goddard College, because Cutler Academy, I was at its end. So I did admissions work, at Goddard. And then things happened there. So I did admissions work at Johnson State. We left and came back every summer from 1979 until 12 years ago when we came back permanently. We retired from our teaching jobs down first in Massachusetts and then in the Philadelphia area at Quaker schools. Always, all those years, this was home. And it's funny because we actually were only here permanently for the first 6 years. And yet it was definitely already home. And eventually we used up several realty agents because we looked and looked and looked and looked, and it was me. I was never sure exactly where the kind of property I wanted, but we finally found the one on Uri Road. I've been involved in several different kinds of activities here. The Energy Committee, at the very beginning of the Energy Committee, so I think I'm the oldest standing member of the Energy Committee at this point, and so much has evolved with that. And I am totally not I don't know technology at all. I can hardly, Don gets mad at me because I don't know how to use a computer very well. Whoops, I shouldn't have said that. But but somehow I'm on this Energy Committee and I've learned a lot, but and I think it's an important thing that is happening in the world, and Craftsbury is, compared to some other towns, Craftsbury's come a long way, I think, in that regard. Building window inserts and all sorts of other things that we've done.
A lot of firewood lately.
Yes, yes, yeah. And I learned how to work a splitter.
Ooh.
What else have I done?
Well, the
Oh,
leche con dignidad,
cool.
leche con dignidad.
Migrant justice. I mean, before it was called migrant justice, I got involved with helping out the immigrants who come across the border, and like nobody even knew they were here, and there were hundreds and hundreds of them, thousands, I think, even in Vermont, in the different dairy farms, because the dairy farms needed the labor and I guess didn't want to pay enough to get Americans to do it. So there was this underground layer of people living here without legally being allowed, who needed all kinds of help. So I ended up taking people to their doctor's appointments and their dentist appointments. And one particular woman who was working at the Gebbe farm in Greensboro was pregnant, and so I ended up taking her to all of her prenatal appointments, and I was kind of worried because I was her kind of her sponsor, and she asked me if I would, take her, I'd be there when she gave birth. And then the day came and I was, oh my God, I can't do this. But it was an incredible experience. I'd never witnessed a birth before. And it was an amazing how well the people at Copley Hospital, I mean, she was not the only person that they were helping. They did a great job. So although there's a lot going on about immigrants and illegal aliens and all that stuff, not here. I mean, yes, here, but there's a level, there's a layer of people who are helping. So she had her baby, and the midwife, I don't think that's what she's called, but anyway, she's not a doctor. She works, she's in the birthing, she's a nurse, a birthing nurse specializing. She said, okay, you cut the umbilical cord. And this really is not Craftsbury history, so maybe I shouldn't. I don't know why I'm getting into this, but I've kind of haven't thought about it in a while. So my God, an umbilical cord is a hard thing to cut. I had no idea. And I taught some English to those people. I've been involved in singing all my life, and I'm in the North Country Chorus, which I was glad to be able to be a part of. It's been in existence for 75 years in St. Johnsbury. But I couldn't find a big enough chorus where I wouldn't have to try out. So I found that one. And actually, next, in a couple of weeks, we're having our spring concert. And the music is Considering Matthew Shepard. And it's an incredibly inspiring thing about Matthew Shepard, who was killed and tied to a fence in Wyoming and left to die. It sounds horrible, but it's a just beautiful, beautiful piece of music. And all of us have tears running down our eyes as we're singing this music.
Where will it be?
It's at South Church Hall, which is when you're going up into St. Johnsbury, is right there. Belongs to St. Johnsbury Academy now.
Maybe I can give you a ride.
What have I?
A lot of times when there's things, activities that are going on in town, you and Don are usually, not saying that, sorry about that. This is how rumors happen. But you're often, if there's causes going on in town, because the both are very connected and usually come to that, so thank you.
Well, yeah, I feel like what everybody else is saying, I'm sure there are a lot of nice little towns all over the place, but Craftsbury, for some reason, takes people in, and it does feel like a welcoming home place. And here we are. So I guess that's enough for now.
So I just want to say thank you for recording this. I actually am joining the Heart of West one, and I have a test I have to take tonight for that. And I have training this weekend, and I have to get this stuff done before the training, so I have to go out and take this test. So.
Well, I think we're basically done.
Well, no, it's Carol. And I'm really looking forward to hearing Carol. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the Carol. On the recording.
Wonderful. Be with you.
Would you like to?
Again, it's so hard to follow.
Oh,
yeah. It's like to be first, right?
I mean, if you want to be finished.
Yes, yeah, no, we're happy. I'm happy to treat you.
All right. You might want to speak up a little, Carol, because, it hears us, but we have to speak up a little on it.
Okay,
That's all.
all right, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and so is my husband Ted, and we met right after college. We both went to Cooper Union. He's an architect and I'm a graphic designer. And on our honeymoon, after our wedding, we took the money that friends and relatives gave us for our wedding. And he said, I want to go. I need to buy a piece of property in Vermont. He had been surveying in southern Vermont, and we went down, we took our money and drove up to around snow. And we went to a realtor and we told him what we had to spend, and he just laughed and said, not here, honey. And so he took out a map and he circled Clover. And he said, I have a buddy there. And excuse me, who's a realtor, and he will find you a place. And we were taken to, I guess, 3 places. And one of them was a potato field owned by Winnie Bro from Albany. Did you ever know him?
Oh, yeah.
Winnie Bro, he's the salt of the earth. And it was on Town Line Road. It was kind of from the road all the way up to Martin's Camp. And it was freaking Brooklyn. And there was a stream, there is a stream, and across the stream was a tree had fallen and it had moss all over it. And it was just like a movie. It was just, I remember after we bought it, well, first of all, Winnie Bro didn't want anything but a handshake to seal the deal. And so we gave him a check. And that left us with $11 until the next paycheck from the world. We went back to Brooklyn, and he was great. But we went back one winter because I don't know why we bought it. We couldn't be here. I mean, we had careers in the city, and that's the kind of training that we had had. But we somehow felt it was going to work out ultimately, and we came up once in the winter time, and Teddy had put a swing in the woods. That was what we had. And I went in and to sit on the swing for a while, and it was snowing. And I said, this is like Bing Crosby. Great, anyway, so we found out that we couldn't really build and be here to watch the building or do anything. So the house at the first house in town on the when you're going out of town, so the right hand side was for sale. We went up to see how much it cost, and great, that was a few years later. And we bought that house thinking, yes, we are going to live here. And Genevieve, our first child, was baby, and so we would drive up from Brooklyn well, before she was born, we used to drive up every weekend after work. I'd meet Teddy at the car with a bag of sandwiches, and we'd listen to Gene Shepherd on the way up. And it was paradise. It was great. And then we drive home, and it would take him over an hour to find a parking space once we got that to Brooklyn. But anyway, yeah, that's why I wasn't going to talk, because I know I'm going to just forever. So we were going to move, and we just it wasn't time for us because we had other things that we needed to do. And we moved out of Brooklyn after a while and moved to Tuckahoe, New York, and had Susanna and Michael. And then we moved to Nyack, New York, which is right on the Hudson River, and a wonderful place to raise children, and had Louisa. And we somewhere along the line, when we were in Japan, we had been friends with friends. We had been acquaintances with Dean Brown and his wife, Annika. Do you remember that?
Remember Dean?
I remember Dean.
Yeah. Well, Uncle was his first wife, and he was a realtor. They lived where Emily lives now, over next to the general store. And he wanted a small house, so Teddy designed a small house for him, and he was single at that time. And then he called us up one day to sell us the piece of the field. And I think why he did that was because he figured these guys are from New York, they're never gonna move here. It's gonna be my field, but they'll pay for it. And so we had no intention then of moving up either. But at one time Teddy called up after a long winter and thought to see if he was alive, he was dead, you know, what had happened during the winter time. And Dean said, well, I'm just putting the sign out to sell my little house. And Teddy said, well, go take it in. We're gonna buy us. So we had sold the house at the end of the road years before that. And, well, okay.
You live in all kinds of properties in town, and I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
That's great.
it's all been a great idea. Yeah, and well, we still, yeah, never mind, too much ago. So we bought the tiny house when Michael was crawling, so that was 1981. And then we would come up in the summertime because I was freelancing because of the kids. I was freelancing, and so I would come up in May and be here until September. And Teddy would drive up every weekend. And we had our garden and it was wonderful. And what I did with the 4 kids, instead of going crazy, I would take them to all the libraries. We would go to Craftsbury Library, we would go to East Craftsbury Library, and then we would play volleyball at your house on Friday nights. That was people, grown-ups. That was a lot of fun. Because it was summertime. And then we moved to Syracuse and Ted taught at the university there, and we used to drive over through the Adirondacks, and that was gorgeous. And then our house had to get a little bit bigger. When the kids were teenagers, they couldn't sleep in the sleeping bags around the bed anymore. So he had friends come up and they built the next rooms on a weekend. They framed it all in and worked like crazy. And they had Mrs. Usher, remember Marilyn Usher? Oh, she was a wonderful cook, and they hired her to make food for them so that they would work from crack of dawn as soon as it got light out until they dropped dead at night. And they would go to her house and she'd have this wonderful dinner for them, and they'd go home and fall asleep. And so in the weekend they built that. And then Eddie and Michael pushed out our kitchen another summer after we needed more space that way. And then when we retired, skipping over a whole lot of stuff, we retired and had the decision to make. We realized we couldn't do 2 places being retired. And did we want to continue to live in Syracuse, which we enjoyed tremendously, or finally jump for it? And Teddy left it up to me because then I would not complain about it afterwards. And I said, Craftsbury had options. You know, we could grow our food. We could make another little place if we wanted at some point, and it was a place of the future. And so we did. And I remember Teddy was building the house. The addition, the big addition that we put on, you know, moving up. And so he was up here already, and I was driving up through town the day before we were going to go up with the truck of our stuff at home. And I'm driving through town and I say, what am I going to do here every day? I didn't know anybody really that well after all those years, but we were always summer people, so we did. And Willie Ryan used to call us flatlanders, which just anyway, yeah, one time I made a cow for the old home day parade, and Michael was the front and his cousin was the back, and then Louisa had a tiny little milking can, and Susanna was pulling the cow with a rope, and I had a sweatshirt on, t-shirt on that said Flatlander Farm. that was a lot of fun, that, you've got a picture of that, it's great. I'm joking all around. So not knowing what I was gonna do here, I've been so crazy busy. It's been a great life, it's been a whole new life. I mean, I worked at the Gazette for several years until Susie got sick, and then I just had other things on my mind, and and then I had started bookbinding back in Syracuse, and when we moved up here, I looked at the bookbinders, bookbinder guild, kind of like a phone book, to see if there was anybody anywhere in Vermont that made books. And I saw Tom Twetton's name. So I called him up and I said, hello, I'm me and you're you. I'd like to show you what I do. And so I went over there with some of my things. And he was very kind to say, of course. And I got there and he had a stack of books and he said, can you repair these for me? And I had been making blank books, but I had never used them. And I said, well, of course I can do that. So that's the beginning of being a book store. I have been doing it now since we moved up. We moved up in 2009 from the and what else? I have done some web work up here as well. Oh, yeah, in Syracuse. When we moved to Syracuse, I was the senior web developer for the State University Medical College and Hospital. So I had those skills, and so I've done East Craftsbury Library, and started.
When you're on the website committee too for several years, yeah.
And then I found my people. That's what I always tell my kids, never worry if you don't have friends, because you'll find, your people will find you and you'll find your people. And I found women who draw here, and we got together. Anne Slayton, who is a summer person.
Yeah.
Anne Slayton said, I have a bunch of people who draw, maybe you'd like to join us. And Susan Sawyer was there, giving a class. And it was heaven. It was just great. Farley was there. Hester, of course. Hester has broken our hearts by leaving. It was difficult because we called ourselves the Craftsbury Nine. There were 9 of us. Of course, I not remember all the names, but it was a group of people that you didn't have to talk. We didn't have to talk. It was just, we knew what each other, where we were coming from, and it was just a gift. Best bunch of friends. And Kim Stewart, who is here now. I think she's moving up. And they things like that.
So how long have you lived like full-time in Craftsbury?
Since 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, for many years, I was up here, as I said, and they would come up. And then when the kids got to be teenagers, they were teenagers. And so we used to come up for Christmas and Thanksgiving and New Year's, and that was it. And there's an image in the book by Virginia Woolf, I'm not remembering the name, to the lighthouse. Is it the book To the Lighthouse? Yes. Okay, you'll think of it. And there's an image in this of a house that the family goes to by this lighthouse, wherever it is in England, I think. And when they're not there, there's a bird that flies in front of the window and casts its shadow on the floor where nobody is. It was that feeling of when we would always leave our house up here, that it was by itself. It had the memory of us, but it was here by itself. Anyway, so then now we're here full time, and got a wonderful garden, and we tried to start what that wonderful woman did during COVID. It was during the last time gas prices were really high. And I thought, well, people can't drive to Hardwick to get food from the food pantry, because how can they afford the gas to go there? And so Janine and I started to try to get the names of people that needed help here.
Geneva.
Yeah. And, because the church has a small population and to make it really mean something, I thought that she wanted to have prayer groups or something like that, or yeah, more things going on. And I thought, there's a mission to be done. And so we tried to have it happen, but we didn't get much response to our outreaches at that time. It wasn't the right time, I guess. And people didn't need it as much as they needed it during COVID. So we did after that.
It was a good start. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
It was the start for the wonderful food shelf we have now.
Yeah.
You know? Well, thank you, Carol.
I did ramble. I knew I would ramble and I did ramble, and that's my name. I rambled.
Oh,
Okay.
Carol, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, and then there's a cemetery. I should better plug into
Yeah,
the
you
cemetery.
should.
Yeah, so, yeah, I was visiting our brother's grave there, and I was looking around and I said, it's rusty, that the fence is rusty, it just doesn't look right, and that was me coming out into the community, because now I'm on another committee, and here I am today. Before that, I was in my studio pretty much all the time, or drawing with the ladies, and I guess the women, excuse me, not the ladies. And that was an impetus. I said, well, I have to do this because it's not for me. And I hope we get it done. We're trying very hard. And the community's been very welcoming that way. So now that's my story.
You know, the interesting thing about Craftsbury is, you know, there's so many things that people can be of interest, interested in, and people are welcoming, on different committees in town, different organizations, different activities, I think of music and all the wonderful music things that you guys are involved with, and like I like the web stuff, so there was a website committee that was created and found like, oh yeah, whatever you want to do, they were like very easygoing, and it's harder if you're in Hardwick or Wolcott, it's there's more rules and regulations, and they're a little bit more easygoing than some places.
When I called Gail Kroger about the fence, to say, well, do you have plans for anything this thing? And she said, well, we plan to do it in a couple of years, but you're welcome to find out about people to do it. And I said, well, I don't know, but, and she said, no, she said, you're a property owner in the cemetery. Oh, that was the thing when Susie was passing in Norway. And he said, would you like to be buried? And she said, in the family plot in Craftsbury. And we looked at each other, we said, don't have a family plot in Craftsbury. But Craftsbury's home, even before we moved here, we would always say to the kids, if anything happens globally, like global things, meet in Craftsbury. You could always walk to Craftsbury and we'll meet you. And but anyway, Gail was very welcoming. People just, come on, let's do it.
That's the beauty of small community and things like that, you don't have in a lot of the other nearby towns, or, it
Another
really
story
is
came to
wonderful
me. Can
that
I
way.
tell that? Just one more story.
Yeah.
I was coming out of the general store one day, and there was a young couple with a child sitting on the bench outside, and they said, excuse me, do I mind if I ask you something? And he said, no, what do I? And she said, they said, what is it about this town? It just feels different. And I said, well, I can't, again, I said, the only thing I can tell you is that when we built the new library, how the books got transported to the new library was by, what did they call it, bucket brigade?
Bucket brigade, yeah.
A bucket brigade across the common in the winter to the new library. I said, that's who this town is. Yeah.
I have a snippet. Bobby rarely got involved in group things, it just wasn't his thing. But he did make a presentation to the school board back when they needed to build another building. And Bobby came up with, the idea of a, it was energy efficient, it was a mound building, you know, it would be earthbound,
Mhm.
earth
Render,
covered,
is that it?
what is it?
Render. What is it
Uh,
called? Okay, maybe not.
Okay, it doesn't matter, it was just, it would not be a typical, it wasn't a traditional building. And he made the presentation and Ted got it. I mean, he understood Bobby
I'm sure.
and,
He loved the
yeah,
drawings.
and nobody else did. I mean, I don't wanna say nobody understood, but because it wasn't a traditional white clapboard building, it didn't go anywhere, but it would, you know, in a couple of years, it became even more relevant
Mhm.
in terms of heat exchange, and
He was ahead of his
he
time.
was ahead of his time, and Ted was, that's how I mean, I barely know Ted, but he's a kindred spirit is what I say, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was-
Bobby was grateful for that. Cause it took a lot, he's not a
Mhm.
presenter type guy.
Right. Well, Michelle, thank you all. I think this is, I think we've come up with a model for, what I hope is going to be continued into the future, so.
But if you do this with everybody in Craftsbury, you're gonna have 7 lives at least.
Well,
You think your brain out.
we'll see.